I cut off my fiancée without a word after she suggested an open relationship right before the wedding. I know this is long and I have tried to trim it down, but this story goes way back and I need advice on what to do when I get home in 2 days, and yes, I have changed all the names, obviously. Jen and I had been close since we were little kids because our parents were longtime friends. We grew up side by side and started dating in high school. It kind of felt like our families had it all mapped out for us before we even knew what we wanted. When I left town to get my master's degree, she stayed behind to study nursing. After a year of long distance, we agreed to stop being a couple and just focus on staying close friends. We both dated other people, but deep down we both kind of knew we were just waiting to get back to each other one day. I stayed in the city where I got my degree and started working. I waited patiently for a chance to transfer back home, and when I finally got it, I felt like everything was falling into place. Jen was seeing someone seriously by then, and he seemed like a good enough guy, but he always acted uneasy about me still being in her life. I understood, so I backed off out of respect, even though Jen and I still kept in touch a few times a year. My boss, Paul, who was in his 40s, became a mentor to me and kind of a friend. One day he told me about a job opening in Tokyo that was coming up soon. The pay wasn't amazing, but rent, travel, and other costs would all be covered. He said it would be a great stepping stone, something that helped him early in his own career. I thought about it, talked to my folks and friends, and figured it was worth it. Paul said he would recommend me if I wanted it. So I packed up and left for Tokyo. That first year was brutal. The culture, the social norms, everything was tough to adjust to, not just in Japan but in the other places I had to visit for work. One thing that caught me off guard was how open women were with foreign men. I ended up meeting a lot of smart, successful women who just wanted casual fun. I was honest with all of them, told them I was not looking for anything serious. I had a lot of short flings. After the first year, I extended my contract twice and stayed for 3 years total. Paul visited once in a while for work or just to hang out, and yeah, we had some pretty wild nights in places like Angeles City in the Philippines. When my time there ended, I came back home and put a down payment on a house just outside the city. After living in a place packed with millions of people, I just wanted some breathing room. After about a month, I ran into Jen while visiting my parents. She had broken up with her boyfriend a year earlier, and we started getting close again. We had always kept in touch, but now it felt different. We started dating, and I actually held off on sleeping with her for a while because, honestly, I was nervous. I had gotten used to being with a lot of different women while overseas, and I was afraid of how that might affect me. People back home kind of knew I had been dating around, and I had a few photos with different women on social media, but it wasn't like I posted every detail. Even my mom joked about it and called me a womanizer a few times, and yeah, that one stung a bit. Anyway, when Jen and I finally got physical again, she immediately noticed I had changed. She said it in a surprised tone, like I had picked up a lot of experience. She asked a few questions, and I did not exactly lie, but I did not tell her everything either. I gave her a watered-down version of the truth, because even the real number cut in half would have sounded bad. Still, I had no doubt in my mind that I could be faithful to her. But that little seed I planted with my half-truths would come back later and cause problems. Our families were thrilled we were back together, like it was finally happening the way it was always supposed to. I spoke to her parents, proposed, and she moved in. Things were going great. She would ask things like whether I was happy with her, and I brushed it off at the time. Then came December 2019. Wedding was scheduled for June 2020, but of course, we all know what happened to those plans. Christmas was great. Then, right before New Year's, everything started falling apart. I was working on the computer when Jen and her cousin Tammy, who I also grew up with, were going over wedding stuff. Jen asked if we could talk. Tammy sat on the couch, and I figured she was just hanging around, nothing more. Jen told me not to interrupt or freak out, just listen. She said our bedroom connection was off and she was worried I would eventually cheat on her because I would get bored. She said she didn't want our future kids to deal with that kind of hurt. I thought she was building up to a breakup. But then she dropped the bomb, she wanted to open the relationship. She said it was to gain more experience, and that it would make her feel more confident. She swore I was the only man she ever loved and that no other relationship had worked because none of them were me. At first, I thought it was a bad joke. She kept explaining rules: only strangers, never someone we know, no repeats, no emotional attachments. I was stunned. I just froze. I could not believe it was serious. Then I started yelling. I looked at Tammy and asked if she put her up to it. Tammy said she was just there for support. Jen said I could do the same if I wanted, as long as I followed the same rules. I snapped and told her I did not want random hookups, I just wanted one person. When she asked who, I looked her straight in the eyes and said I wanted to sleep with Tammy. I was trying to prove a point. Jen freaked out, Tammy turned red, and things got even more uncomfortable. Jen said Tammy was family, and that it was disgusting to even suggest it. I felt like I had entered some alternate reality. I told her flat out that if she went through with this, we were done. I loved her and wanted to work things out, but not like this. I stormed off and slept in the guest room. I could hear them talking downstairs, but I could not make out what they were saying. I barely slept that night, dragged myself through work the next day. Jen started night shifts that week, so we avoided being around each other, which helped cool things off a little. She kept leaving me dinner with a love note and texting, but I gave short replies. The following week, I was working on the computer again and noticed an email pop up on her account. It was a hotel reservation. A pretty decent place near my office. I thought maybe she was planning something nice to make up for that whole conversation. Next morning, I waited to hear something from her about it, but all she said was how glad she was that she had one night of work left. That made no sense if she had a hotel room booked. My stomach turned. I started digging. Couldn't find anything on dating sites. Paul came into my office and saw something was off. I told him the basics and he said we should grab lunch. When he suggested the restaurant at that same hotel, I blurted out no way. He had no idea about the hotel part. We went somewhere else, but I could barely eat. He told me to take as much time off as I needed, paid or unpaid. I told him I couldn't go back home. I couldn't face her. I packed a bunch of my stuff and went back to the office. Paul suggested we go wait at the hotel and see if she shows up. I didn't want to, but I had to know. We sat in the lounge bar and waited. I kept hoping she wouldn't show. But around 6:30, Paul tapped me on the shoulder, and there she was, checking in. Not in her work uniform. We waited about 10 minutes after she went up in the elevator, then Paul and I walked over to the front desk and I asked the woman to connect me to Jen's room, and the moment she picked up, I just started shouting into the phone, not caring what I sounded like, and she kept saying hello like she had no idea what was going on, and I told her straight up that I warned her if she ever went through with this, we were done for good, the wedding was cancelled, the relationship was over, and I hung up. Before she could say a word and walked right out of there without looking back, completely shaking, no clue where to go, so I went back to Paul's place and that's when my phone started going crazy, non-stop calls and texts, but the only person I called was my dad and I told him the PG version of what happened and that I had to get out of town for a while and I knew I was short with him but I just could not talk anymore and I feel bad about that because he did not deserve it, but I was breaking down and for the next 2 days I ignored every call, every message, even from friends and family, because I could not think straight and everything felt like I was trying to walk through deep water in boots filled with cement, and Paul sat me down and told me to think about protecting myself, the finances, the house, the wedding money, the car loan, all of it, and I had not even considered any of that. I was just drowning in it all and did not care about money or anything else, but the next day, I wrote Jen an email saying this was the last time I would be in touch, that I was leaving town, and everything we had was done, no wedding, no future, no more us, and I called my dad back later and explained more calmly and he was crushed but he said he understood I needed space and still hoped things could be fixed but I did not see how, and about 10 days later I booked a flight and ended up in Bali, no messages, no replies to her or anyone else, I do not know if she stayed in that hotel room or not and I did not want to, I just checked out mentally. And when I landed, I stayed drunk for nearly a month and barely kept in touch with anyone except my dad and worked through Paul. I did not even care if they fired me, I felt full of hate and guilt and confusion and wanted to erase everything, and after a few weeks Paul asked if I could head back to Tokyo for a short assignment, and since that new global virus was getting talked about more, I thought maybe I should head home to Canada. and deal with things there, but figured I could wait a bit. I told Paul the first would head home around May since everyone thought this would just last a month or two, but that was a mistake because I ended up stuck in Japan for another year, eventually got vaccinated, but by then I had no desire to go back. The house was rented out and I was speaking to my family now and then, but every time they brought up Jen I shut it down. I did not want to hear her name, and then in September I got the call that my dad had a heart attack, not life-threatening, but he needed a triple bypass, and even though those surgeries are a lot safer these days, I knew I had to go back and see him just in case, even though I dreaded going back because I knew seeing Jen would stir everything up again and I was not ready for that. I just wanted to see my family and thank Paul for having my back even when I did not deserve it, but I also knew I would run into her and I had no idea how I would react, and I know this is still too long even after leaving so much out, but I really could use some straight-up advice or even just someone telling me how stupid I have been, because I am flying out in a few hours and landing in about a day and I feel like I am walking into a storm without a raincoat or a plan. And then after I landed I went straight to see my dad and he looked better than I expected and was in good spirits and seemed ready for surgery. Mom was trying to act calm but I could see she was worried. Underneath, I stayed with Dad almost a full day and we just talked about everything under the sun but kept it light, no heavy topics. I told him I was there for him but also needed this trip to clean up my life and make some changes and maybe fix a few things if possible. Then later I caught up with Paul and we talked about work and Dad and he asked if I had spoken to Jen and I said no and he told me the big boss wanted to talk to me but it could wait. I figured I might as well get it over with. I had a list of things I needed to face while I was back and she was one of them, so I showed up at the office for the first time in ages. A lot of familiar faces were gone and there were some new ones. A few people said hi and we went up to the old man's office which I had never been inside before, and this guy had always been a mystery, only came around once in a while and people treated him like royalty. He tells us this is a closed meeting and whatever is said stays between us and then he just starts lecturing about loyalty and showing up and he made some fair points honestly. Then he turns to Paul and asks why they should keep me around and Paul goes off about how I save accounts and bring in clients and how they could never hire someone else at 20% under market like they pay me and I am sitting there like what the hell. And then both of them start cracking up like it is some comedy show and the old man wipes a tear from his eye and says that is why Paul is the best vice president he has. And I am kind of stunned but also feel a little cheap, and then the old man leans forward and says, look kid, I know you had woman troubles so let me tell you something and I do not know if this is word for word but it went something like this. God gives a woman eyebrows and she pulls them out and draws on new ones. He gives her a face and she covers it with makeup. He gives her a body and she wears tight clothes to change it. And if God himself cannot satisfy her then how in the world can you? So do not kill yourself over it. And I did not even know how to respond because that was probably the most random but honest thing I had heard in a long time. And then he tells Paul to take care of things and not to let his mother kill him for firing me. And that is when it hits me, these two are related somehow. And when we walk out I look at Paul and say seriously, 20% below market? And he throws an arm around me and says do not worry about it, I have your back. And I ask am I getting fired or written up and he laughs and says no you idiot, you are getting promoted. And then kisses me on the side of the head and I tell him he could have told me that before and he says it was more fun this way, he missed me, now let us go get something strong to drink. It was 8:30 in the morning and I looked at Paul and said seriously, who starts drinking this early? And he just laughed and said all the best people do and that I still had a lot to learn about how to actually enjoy life, and it did not surprise me coming from the same guy who once got drunk on sake and ended up in a fistfight with a monkey at a hot spring in Japan and lost, I might add. So we went out and got hammered like old times and talked about work and what was coming next, and we talked about Jen too. And he told me flat out that I needed to meet with her and get some real closure, said we both made mistakes but deep down we are good people and I would never be able to move on if I still had all this emotion locked up inside, said once that was settled we could talk about what I wanted to do job-wise, future plans, and all that, so at least I had one thing checked off the list which was not getting fired and Dad was looking stable and recovering, but the thing with Jen stayed stuck in my mind and would not let up, so I went on her page, unblocked her and scrolled through a bit, trying to prepare myself mentally for whatever was going to come next, and I ended up sending her a message asking if she wanted to meet for dinner soon and she responded politely and we set something up, nothing heavy, just small talk at first, but I knew it was going to hit hard, I was just not sure how, and when the day came we picked a restaurant and agreed to meet after she finished work and I sat there afraid of two things, either that I would still be so angry I would blow up or that I would still be in love and fall apart, and I was praying to find some middle ground in all of that mess. But as soon as she walked through the door, all my plans went straight out the window. She looked beautiful, gave me that smile, walked over and hugged me and I caught that scent of her perfume, the one I used to love, and I could feel my nerves start to come apart inside me. I Was calmer than ever on the outside, but underneath I was unraveling. We started with small talk, asked about my dad and told me she always checked on him when she was working her shifts, said the surgeon doing the bypass was top notch and it actually made me feel better hearing that. Then she talked about her crazy work schedule during the pandemic and I shared some stuff about being locked down in Tokyo and the conversation was light until it was not anymore and she looked at me different and I knew it was coming and the next part was kind of a blur, but I will try to tell it as best as I can remember. She started by saying she was sorry for everything and for hurting me, and I asked her if she was just sorry because she got caught or if she actually regretted what she had done to us, and she said it was not about being caught, that she knew she ruined what we had because she let her own insecurities take over. And I asked if the whole thing was just a way to punish me for my past when we were not together, and she admitted it might have been part of it, but also said that no man before me had meant anything to her the way I did, and even her ex Tim, the one before we got back together, told her he could never compete with how she felt about me, said that was why they broke up, and I never knew that, and I will be honest, it shocked me a bit, and she admitted that when she came up with that open relationship idea, she thought she could do it without catching feelings, even if I found out we could still work through it like always, and I told her straight up she could not have been more wrong. It was the most painful thing I had ever been through, and I never needed her to be perfect or experienced or whatever. I just needed her to be mine and only mine. And she said that nothing and no one ever measured up to what she had with me. But now she was wondering if it was love or just the dream everyone around us had for us since we were kids, like maybe we were chasing something that was never really ours to begin with. And then she got emotional and stepped away to the restroom to pull herself together, and meanwhile I glanced over to the lounge where Paul was sitting nearby for backup just in case I needed someone, and he was having a lively chat with two attractive women and giving the whole animated performance with hand gestures and all. And when he finally noticed me watching, he gave me a half smile and a thumbs up, and when I nodded back he gave me the finger with a grin and turned right back to the ladies. That guy is unbelievable. And Jen came back and sat down again and asked if there was anything I wanted to know about that night, and I said it did not matter now because nothing could undo it, and she said nothing ever actually happened. She got scared when I called and ran downstairs, but I was already gone, and I said again it does not matter. I was not here to relive it all but to figure out how to move forward, and she asked if I could forgive her. And I told her I already had, that she was not an awful person, just someone who made terrible decisions that cost us everything, and I admitted I should have been more open to, more understanding of her fears, and my emotions were still bouncing between wanting to scream and wanting to forget and take her home. But I had been watching all these videos lately, men blaming themselves for what their partners did, and I swore I would not be one of them. I was not going to let myself fall into that trap. And I looked at her thinking about what the old man had said about painted faces and fake smiles, and I wondered if I ever really knew her or if any man really knows what is going on in their heads. And I hardened myself, and she asked what comes next, if there was anything left for us. And I told her to remember that time when we were kids and that dog ran at us when we were walking home from the park, and I stepped in front of her without thinking, just instinct, and the dog ran off when the owner called it, but for a moment I thought I was going to get bit, and I told her that even back then I stood in front of her to protect her and I never stopped doing that. Even now, I gave her everything, and when I did she put a knife in my back, and I told her it reminded me of that story about the frog and the scorpion, and that really hit her. I could see it. She put her head down and started crying again, and then she pulled out the ring box and slid it across the table, and I left it sitting there. Told her I did not want it, told her I did not want to be sitting there feeling like this. I wanted to be at home playing with the baby we would have had by now, and after I said that she completely broke down and I instantly felt like I went too far. Told her I was sorry for saying that and that it just came out in the moment, and after that we calmed down and had a real conversation, talked about how close our families are and how her parents are like a second family to me and mine to her, and how maybe one day we could exist as friends even if we are not together, because getting back together is not going to happen. And when we finished she got up and we hugged for a long time and I told her goodbye, and now I am going to stop here and wrap the rest of this up tomorrow because it has been an exhausting couple of days.